Our reflection today is based on Ezekiel chapter 34, verses 11 to 16, and then verses 20 to 24. Before I read the passage, I just want to say that we hear a lot about leadership today, don't we? And obviously, as we survey the media, we see all sorts of examples of leadership offered to us. Leadership which inspires us and encourages us and challenges us, but also leadership that frustrates us, disappoints us, angers us, and we're sometimes left wondering, where are the role models for leadership today? And there's a sort of a heading of leadership held over the passage that we're going to read today. And it presents to us a model of leadership which is after Jesus himself. And I hope that whether you see yourself as a recognised leader with some sort of leadership title, if you like, or whether actually you're an influencer, which is also a style of leadership, that there'll be something here to encourage you, to challenge you, and generally to chew on. So here's the passage, and here's a little challenge for you as well. See if you can spot how many times the word will appears in these two passages. And let's see if we agree at the end. So Ezekiel chapter 34, verses 11 to 16. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines and in all the settlements in the land. I will tend them in good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. But the sleek and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with justice. And then from verses 20 to 24 of the same chapter. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says to them. See, I myself will judge between the fat sheep and the lean sheep. Because you shove with flank and shoulder, butting all the weak sheep with your horns until you've driven them away, I will save my flock, and they will no longer be plundered. I will judge between one sheep and another. I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, how many did you count? I reckon there were 24 wills in those few short verses. And it's a future tense, isn't it? And it's an emphatic statement. It doesn't say, I might do this, or I could do this if, or anything like that. The word of God comes to us through Ezekiel, and it says, I will. Now, Jesus himself, as we read about all that he has to say in the New Testament, had obviously spent time meditating on Ezekiel. It was very important to him. And he was aware that, as we are, or probably need to be, that Ezekiel was a master of dealing with catastrophe. And the catastrophe in particular that Ezekiel was right in the middle of was the invasion of Israel by Babylon in the 6th century BC. So in effect 2,500 years ago. For many people around at that time, denial was the primary response. But God was at work in it all, in the catastrophe. And Ezekiel saw that God was at work. Indeed, God was actually using the catastrophe. He showed them that so that they would be able to embrace God in the worst of times. So Ezekiel was sort of a commentator, a secretary on the times, of the times, and he was explaining to them what was happening. This is the context for this passage. And if we want an example or a couple of examples of how Jesus picked up on these themes, we can look in Matthew chapter 9, verse 36, when it says, speaking about Jesus, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And then in John chapter 10, verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. The writings of Ezekiel were very, very important to Jesus. They had things to say to him. And so therefore, I also think they have things to say to us. And my big question is, for all of us really, is that God is still the Good Shepherd, as we see him teach us through Jesus. Jesus still teaches us today by the power of the Spirit. God is on mission in his world. And will we actually join in with what he's doing? As we consider these verses, it seems to me that compassion comes through again and again as Ezekiel looked at the people. But he showed no compassion for the people's leaders. He said they were self-seeking shepherds who were more concerned with stuffing their own bellies than when feeding their flocks, according to the Message translation. They looked upon other people as commodities, not human beings with souls to be lovingly tended in green pastures and carefully led by still waters. They were ego-driven, proud and self-seeking. Ouch! Ouch! That's another straight between the eyes statement, isn't it? You see, for Ezekiel, as for God, the individual was of the highest value to Ezekiel. Even if that person was sick or disabled in some way, wandering or lost. When people aren't treated compassionately, it's a justice issue, and we need to be angry about it and work out what our appropriate response is. There was a disastrous failure in leadership going on at that time, and it was intolerable to God. The shepherds weren't acting as shepherds should have been. His original plan was that people should exercise leadership that would express love and justice, which would lead them to enjoy fulfillment then and harmony in their own lives, and that wasn't happening. So God took the initiative, and he will take the initiative. He would shepherd the people himself, taking care of the unfortunate and the weak, exercising a careful rule over the fat and the strong. The healthy ones weren't going to be overworked anymore. And in some ways, I guess, this follows on from my reflection of the other day, actually, when you think about it. So Jesus took on the title of shepherd and modelled compassionate leadership. And his disciple Peter exhorted leaders to follow that example. Peter says, to the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder and as a witness of Christ's sufferings, who also will share in the glory to be revealed. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care. So again, I repeat, whether we're recognised leaders, acknowledged leaders with leadership titles, we all have influence of one sort or another, whether it's within our group of friends or in our families or our places of work, wherever we are. There's one thing for sure, God opposes the proud, but he shows favour to the humble, Peter goes on to say. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. In our small group, we've been studying the Beatitudes recently, and they're very, very challenging. And I'm not going to read all of them out, but here are a couple of them. You're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more of God and his rule. He will shepherd us when we feel there's nowhere else to go. When everything else has failed us, when we're feeling thoroughly fed up, God will draw alongside. You're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and heart, put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. And if we're influencing and leading and being disciples of Jesus Christ from that place of constantly looking out for how we can help and support others, we will be amazed at the change that takes place. So why are people blessed when they're in all these situations? Because that's where God's found. He still is the good shepherd in his world. His heart still is full of compassion for those who are struggling, the depressed, the isolated, the bereaved, and he's inviting us to join him in his mission. To repeat, God is on mission in his world. Will we join in with what he's doing? Amen.